It's its own subculture at this point. It's taken on a life of its own that kind of almost expands upon Elvis.
This is not my world. So to me, it's kind of like, why would someone do this? Why would someone go watch someone do this? What do you think is the big appeal for people to come and see an Elvis impersonator?
I think it's that longing to see Elvis. Elvis was always described as one of the most electrifying performers to see in the flesh, you know. Unfortunately, I was born 7 years after he died, so I obviously never got the chance to do it, and so many people didn't get a chance to see him.
Now, is this a full-time living?
Yes.
Okay. I'll just ask you, how much money do you make?
Every year it's different, because it depends on what work you get. But what I will say is that it's a reasonable living. It's a reasonable living. It's above average for me.
Six figures or high fives? Sounds like high fives, low sixes.
High fives.
That's pretty good.
But there are guys out there who are well into the six figures. Yeah, absolutely. I don't know how many, but there are quite a few who are up there.
How competitive is the industry?
Very competitive. There are something like 55,000 Elvis tributes in the world, is the last figure I heard quoted, which is kind of crazy.
Like, if you're obviously looking and sounding like Elvis, you know how some people are. Does Elvis impersonation have some residual benefits after the show? Are people like, oh, I've always wanted to hook up with Elvis?
This is a question I asked my wife when we first met. I said, is it about me or is it about Elvis? Because we actually met when I was presenting an award ceremony dressed as Elvis. So she said, no, don't worry, it's not about Elvis. Although she did tell me a story, because she's slightly older than me, my wife, and she was 3 when Elvis died. And apparently she cried and told her mum that she was really upset because one day she was supposed to marry Elvis, is what she said as a 3-year-old, apparently. So marrying me, you know, not the same thing, but sort of. But no, she doesn't feel that way. But it does make you wonder, you know. It's part of the appeal. If you can, Elvis was an incredibly handsome man. Let's be honest, he's one of the best looking men ever, I think. So if you're handsome naturally, if you can look handsome on stage, that does help, because the sex appeal is part of the appeal.
Where do you get the clothes?
Well, luckily enough, there are a lot of vendors out there providing wares for Elvis tributes, because the Elvis tribute business is big business. It still is big business. In fact, it's getting bigger still, which is amazing. So there are several companies who make replica Elvis outfits. Most of mine come from an American company called B&K Enterprises, and they actually partnered with the original designers of Elvis's outfits to buy the patterns, the designs. And they actually had one of Elvis's original designers on their books working for them for many years, actually making the outfits. So you can't get really any more authentic than that, of actually buying a suit that is derived from those original patterns and designs. But there are other fantastic vendors around the world as well who also make amazing replicas. They're expensive, they're big investments, they cost thousands of dollars, these outfits, but they're the tools of your trade.
What are some of your favorite little Elvis gestures, like little things that he would do with his face, with his movements, those kind of things?
One of them would just be this kind of, I mean, the obvious one is the lip, obviously, you know, and he'd tell jokes about that, like, you know, I got a fish hook right here, you know. They said he's trying to be sexy. No, I got a fish hook right here, you know. And silly things like that, you know. That's the obvious one everyone knows. But just things like looking around and just sort of going, you know, blowing his lips a bit like, wow, this is a big thing, you know. Another thing he'd do is sort of, he'd make little jokey gestures with his face. Because the thing with Elvis is that he had a great sense of humor as a performer as well. He didn't take himself too seriously. He took his music seriously, but never himself too seriously. So he'd do sort of, you know, he'd cross his eyes or do this, you know, look around in funny ways. And putting those little bits into the show, I think, helps to create that sense of him as a person.
Do you inadvertently end up looking like Elvis all the time? Like, in order to kind of appear like Elvis on the stage, do you basically have to look like Elvis all the time in real life?
Well, as you can see from this video, obviously I've got sideburns and I've got a bit of the Elvis hair going on here. So you don't have to do that. I was talking the other day to a very famous Elvis tribute. He's completely bald. So you would not see him in the street and think Elvis, because he just sticks it on. If you are in my position, you do inadvertently get attention for being Elvis, and people will look and go, right, Elvis, right. You know, this is a British accent coming out. Right, Elvis. Or they'll go, or they'll just walk past and go, and you know, oh, great, yeah, thanks. Never heard that one before.
Where do you think the future goes for yourself, for Elvis, the world of Elvis impersonation? Like, what do you think the future holds? Is this declining, rising, staying the same?
It's its own subculture at this point. It's taken on a life of its own that kind of almost expands upon Elvis. What's interesting is that some of the most famous Elvis tribute artists now, they're still dressing as Elvis, doing his songs, etc. But they've kind of expanded the horizons in terms of the entertainment value, the presentation of the shows in a way that Elvis never really did. But it's very popular. I'm confident about the future of Elvis fandom, because it's not just people who grew up with Elvis who are coming to see shows, it's kids. I can tell you the number of children who come to my shows dressed in Elvis suits, and they come up afterwards and they meet me and they have a picture and they say, I want to be an Elvis tribute when I'm older. It's taken on a life of its own, which is kind of beyond Elvis. I think Elvis's mind would be blown by this, to be honest, because he was always worried that people would forget him overnight. He used to have nightmares about that everyone would somehow realize he was no good and they'd forget about him. But in a way, he's everlasting at this point.
Parts of the country / parts of the world that are really into Elvis. Like, you know, if you're going to this location, they are all about it.
Honestly, you will find big groups of Elvis fans almost anywhere. The UK in particular has a very big following of Elvis, one of the biggest outside of the United States. Australia is also another place which has a big following. Countries where you see a lot of Elvis tributes traveling to and working in is a good indicator that they've got a big following. But around Europe, the Netherlands, Germany, which I'm off to in a few days, there are specific countries which have very passionate followings. But honestly, I think virtually any country, Japan has a massive Elvis following. The former Japanese Prime Minister was a huge Elvis fan, and he was given a private tour of Graceland a few years ago. So pretty much anywhere you go, there are Elvis fans.